Hello, everyone, and welcome to this January LifeWave Connect product webinar. So excited to be with you. Today, we're going to be talking about why age Aeon and X39. Of course, we currently have a promotion running in the vast majority of our markets on these two products. It goes through the 20th, so visit the website for details on that promotion. We're coming off of a big event in Nova where we got a lot of really good information and product information. And so we're just thrilled. I would like to bring on our CEO, founder, and inventor of LifeWave Technology, David Schmidt. David, are you with us?
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing today?
Good. Great to see you as always.
Oh, it's good to see you too. Now, David, I'm particularly excited about this webinar because as long as I have been here, I've heard you say on multiple occasions that the two products that are your favorite, if you can have favorites, but the two products you'll always have on are Aeon and X39. So I was wondering if to kind of start out, you could maybe give us just a little welcome, but then also I'd love to kind of hear a little bit of the background of these products and the development.
Yeah, sure thing. So first of all, I would like to thank all of our brand partners for being at Nova. We had nearly 4,000 people. It was over 3,800 people that were on Saturday. So that was by far the biggest Nova event that we ever had. So it was truly extraordinary. So I definitely want to thank all of our brand partners. I want to thank all of our leaders that helped support it. And of course, we had many leader events that were around the world where they were hosting Nova. And I definitely want to thank our staff and all of our members that participated in Nova to help make it great. So just want to send out that thank you. So going back to subject of X39 and Aeon, I would say out of all the products that X39 and Aeon have the most interesting development stories. Not that some of them don't. Developing the energy patches was incredibly interesting because that all started with the U.S. Navy. But then what made Aeon interesting was that I was at a party with scientists at Suzanne Summers' house. And I got a chance to speak with Dr. Stan Brzezinski, who is best known for having developed a natural therapy for cancer. And Dr. Brzezinski has a clinic in Houston, Texas, and he is a phenomenal guy. His wife is a medical doctor, his son is a medical doctor, and they're really doing some phenomenal work. And one of the things that Dr. Brzezinski was interested in was anti-aging. And he told me about these experiments that he had done where he wanted to know why a queen bee would live 50 to 60 times longer than a worker bee. So he was able to isolate the compound in the honey, or you'd say royal jelly, that the queen bee was eating that the worker bee wasn't. And it's a very simple peptide. And he found that when injecting this peptide into a worker bee, one injection, you could increase the lifespan of the worker bee by 5 to 6 times over normal. So think about that with human beings. Imagine if we could get one injection of something for our entire lives and live to be 500 or 600 years old, right? That would be pretty extraordinary. So unfortunately, what Dr. Brzezinski found was that in order to get this to work in human beings, you had to have 300 grams of this peptide each day. And you had to get it over a period of 20 hours. And you had to do it by IV. It wasn't something that you could consume because peptides are broken down in the stomach. So that's when I set out to see if we could design a patch to elevate this peptide. And that was the birth of Aeon. And because of its longevity effects, that it provides stress reduction, some other huge benefits. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. So this means that people will experience immediate benefits from Aeon, as well as very powerful long-term benefits. Now, we're getting asked a question, which is an obvious question: what peptide is it? And, when we talk about the glutathione patch, we say, well, it elevates glutathione. When we talk about carnosine, well, it elevates carnosine. X39 elevates GHK. The reason why we don't mention this peptide is because if you did a Google search on it, the most prominent research shows that it's used in cancer therapy. And we don't want it to appear that we're making a claim that the Aeon patch can be used in cancer therapy. We definitely don't make that claim. But we will definitely be talking about what benefits people will get from wearing the Aeon patch. We're going to dig into that in quite a bit of detail and why it makes such a perfect complement to X39.
It's a fascinating story on the origins with the doctor at the party, and it's fun to hear how some of these things come about. In terms of X39, what was the inspiration for that patch, and kind of what was the background on developing that one?
Yeah, so back in the late 2000s, I began to see that it was very obvious that stem cell medicine was going to be the future. And that in the future, we would go into hospitals, we get injections of stem cells as a regular protocol to support overall healing. And I wanted LifeWave to be on the cutting edge. So I thought it's time that we put money and attention and focus into developing a stem cell product. And that was an incredible journey. We got one of the most interesting things that came out of that was we got to do our work at the National University of Ireland in Galway. And I personally was able to work with Dr. Tim O'Brien. And Dr. O'Brien is one of the most prominent stem cell scientists in the world. And so we worked at their Regenerative Medicine Institute. I made a presentation, and we ended up getting funding through Scientific Foundation Ireland. And we were able to demonstrate that you don't have to give people stem cell injections, that it's possible with energy to activate the stem cells in the body. So that was a journey that took many, many years. But of course, it culminated in our X39 product, and that has dramatically changed the trajectory of the company. So, of course, in 2022, sales were over 10 times higher than they were in 2018 when we were just pre-launching X39.
That's incredible. I know you talked a little bit about that in your presentation recently in Nova as well, that really was a catalyst for quite a bit of growth. And then the combination of these two products, I'd really like to dive in now, the combination of these two products and some of the studies behind them and the benefits. And can we spend just a little bit of time kind of digging into the science and the studies?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So, of course, all of our studies are located in the science section of the website. And we have over 80 clinical studies that we've done over the years now, from when we first started in 2002. And we started as a networking company in 2004, but LifeWave actually started as a company in 2002. So any studies that you want to look at are over at this section. To understand why X39 and Aeon are such a great combination, we really need to understand the healing process in the human body and why some people do not heal, especially as we age. It becomes more difficult. So an easy way to summarize this is that when there is an injury in the body, there is first an increase in oxidative chemicals. Now, we think of oxidative stress as being a bad thing, but it's really not. It's only a bad thing if it's chronic, if it goes on in the body for a long time. Oxidative chemicals are going to help to kill off things like viruses and bacteria. So if you have, let's say, an open cut on your body, you want those oxidative chemicals there to inhibit a bacterial infection. And of course, we know that when we don't, have enough production of oxidative chemicals, we need antibiotics. So this is really the body's natural defense system. It's our first line of defense. Now, the oxidative chemicals, they trigger an increase in what's called inflammatory cytokines. And these cytokines are there to break down the damaged tissue so that the stem cells can come in and make new healthy tissue. And the stem cells are attracted to the cytokines. So there's a good news and bad news here. If you're young and healthy, this system works extremely well. The antioxidant system in the body controls the cytokines. That allows the stem cells to go in and do their job. But as we age, what happens is that the antioxidant system becomes depleted. The cytokines don't get neutralized, and the cytokines end up killing the stem cells. So if you've had an injury for a long time and you're not healing, that's what's going on. You have to get control over the inflammatory process. So let's take a look at this. First thing to know is, let's say that you don't have an injury. So this information is going to apply to you as well. So if you've had an injury for a long time or you're healthy, the same information is going to apply. So let's dig into this and take a look. And the reason why it applies to everyone is because there's a link between chronic stress and aging. What that means is, we think of stress as being something emotional, which it is, right? There's emotional stress. There's physical stress. There could be good stress when we exercise. That's good stress. Intermittent fasting, that's good stress. But if we're having a fight with our spouse or partner, that's not good stress. If we're working a lot of hours, that's not healthy stress. And so if this goes on for a long period of time and it's not managed, that leads to accelerated aging. And it seems like, with technology, because we all have smartphones and smart devices, we're working longer hours, we're staying up later at night, not getting as much sleep. We need to think about, what do we want for our quality of life? So here it is right here, a study that's showing the link between chronic stress and accelerated aging. And so what's damaging about this is that if oxidative chemicals and inflammatory chemicals stay in the body, they can cause damage to the organs. They can make you more prone to disease, leads to cancer, and along with a number of health conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes. But here's this illustration in this study is incredibly helpful because it shows you this relationship. Another thing that can happen from elevated stress, it's not here, it's in another study, is that elevated stress can actually cause breaks in your DNA. And this can carry over from one cell to another. Now, the good news, because Jeff, I always believe that we should have good news here. This is not about depressing people. It's about giving everybody solutions. The good news is that if you keep your body's levels of glutathione elevated, let's say you have a really bad day at work and you're under a lot of stress, and this leads to breaks in the DNA. If you keep your glutathione levels elevated, then the elevated glutathione can actually repair the DNA before the cell divides. So that's really important information. But basically, you have some kind of stress. And in this case, they're talking about psychological stress. So under some emotional stress. And this leads to an increase in inflammation in the form of inflammatory cytokines. And this directly has an effect on the mitochondria, the part of your cell that makes energy. So if you're wondering, or if you've wondered why at the end of a very stressful day do you feel so exhausted, it's because the very part of your cell that makes energy is attacked by the inflammatory cytokines. Now, if this goes on for a long period of time, there's actually now a new term for it called inflammaging. And this is just to reflect the idea that elevated levels of inflammation over a long period of time accelerate the aging process. So that's the bad news. The good news is that the solution to this problem is right here. If we want to protect our mitochondria, we need to reduce the levels of inflammation in our body, right? We can't necessarily control our psychological stress, right? So I got the worst of both worlds. I'm both German and Italian. And Germans and Italians are known to be emotionally, I don't know, how should we say it? We're very, Italians and Germans are very emotionally expressive. And we show a lot of that. And I love my heritage, by the way. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying something bad about my Italian and German friends, because I'm certainly not. But Italians especially tend to be emotionally very expressive. So we can use different techniques to get our emotional stress under control, but we really want to control the inflammation. The other thing we need to do is control our oxidative stress. And we can do this by making sure that our diet has sufficient antioxidants, and we use technology like the patches to keep our antioxidant levels elevated. This will reduce inflammation and protect our cells. So there's more, but that's the first start.
It's incredible to me. And Dave, one of the things that's really impressive to me as you go through this is just how relevant it is today. I mean, you talk about, good news and bad news. And I mean, the bad news is that there's a lot of that, but like you said, the good news is there's some solutions there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, we run into all kinds of problems when we are creating new technology in our labs. And what's so very important is to identify what the problem is. It's not always obvious, but if you can identify exactly the problem, then you can start to think about different creative ways of solving the problem. So some of this is going to be evident, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but this is a really great link for those that are interested. But it goes into in great detail what effects stress have on the human body. So if someone is, prone to psychological, emotional stress, one thing that's pretty obvious is that you get muscle tension. Now, in the short term, this can lead to things like headaches, right? You get a stiff upper back, stiff neck, and now you're going to have headaches. But it can lead to things that are more severe, like elevated blood pressure. Another thing that chronic stress will do is affect our ability to breathe and impair circulation. And so this, of course, is a very, very significant problem, and another great reason why we want to get our stress under control. We want to have healthy levels of oxygen in our blood. Very obvious that people with elevated levels of stress are more prone to having heart attacks and stroke. And of course, I spent some time at Nova talking about natural methods to help reduce the risk of heart attack and stroke. But that's one effect of chronic stress. Now, our endocrine system, when it's placed under stress, will release hormones like cortisol. And over time, elevated levels of cortisol can lead to an increase in unwanted body fat, especially an increase of body fat around the waist. And when we get an increase of fat around the waist, this increases our risk for cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. Plus, it can lead to chronic fatigue. So if we're constantly under stress and we're not supporting the adrenal glands and the endocrine system, eventually our adrenal glands, they give out and we will have chronic stress, chronic fatigue, low levels of energy. This one is really interesting because it's not so obvious, but of course, when we're under stress, we can feel that in our stomach. It's in our gut, actually, in our intestine. And what's so interesting about this is that there are neurons in our intestine that look and act like the cells in the brain. So when people say, well, I have a gut feeling, I have a gut instinct, it's because the intestine is actually processing information. Now, of course, we also know that the intestine is part of our immune system. So if we have elevated levels of inflammation in our gut, this is going to impair the immune system. And it's why it's so important to have a healthy diet, to make sure you're not consuming foods that are inflammatory, because it has an effect on your immune system. So those were some of the things that I wanted to point out about what happens with chronic stress. And then the last note here was from these third-party clinical studies, is that we know that glutathione is one of the most important antioxidants in the body. It's called the master antioxidant. And what's so interesting is that when we're young or when we're healthy and our bodies are exposed to stress, one of the things that our bodies will do is immediately increase production of glutathione. It's a defense mechanism. So we want to do things to keep our body's glutathione levels elevated. And when glutathione levels drop off, it leads to a number of different neurological disorders. So, for example, Parkinson's disease is associated with depleted glutathione. We find depleted glutathione in people with arthritis, with MS, with Alzheimer's disease. So it's critically important we keep our glutathione elevated. And fortunately, Aeon and X39 will both do that. But what happens here is that when you're constantly under stress, your body will have the really great response of elevating glutathione. But as we age, that capacity decreases. So this is why it's so important to have strategies to manage the emotional stress in your life, to have a diet that's rich in nutrients, to drink plenty of water, to stay away from things that are harmful, to exercise. And of course, we know that the best thing that you can do is try to always respond with love and kindness and understanding, because it is the remedy for emotional stress. So before we get on to our clinical studies, I wanted to provide that background.
It's amazing to me because we've already talked about it, but just the relevancy of what's going on in the world today. I can't think of one person that this doesn't affect, David. And as I'm kind of breaking this down from a marketing standpoint, you think, everybody has stress. Stress causes issues, and those issues cause aging. You just listed them off: aging, gut issues, inflammation issues, all that kind of stuff. And so then the natural next question is, okay, well, we get it. There's something wrong there. So what do we do? What's the solution? How do we make this better? And so it seems to be a really good way to kind of understand and start the conversation.
Yeah, and this is very relevant today. If we think back to the beginning of the pandemic, when very little was known about COVID, it was understandably, an understandable response from people was to react with apprehension. Some people went into a state of fear. Maybe they had a compromised immune system, so understandably, they'd be really scared about what's going to happen next. And because we knew so little about this virus and it was spreading, the question was, well, okay, well, if I get this, what's going to happen? Am I going to be in the hospital? Am I going to die? How do I fight this? What's available? And from my perspective, here in the United States, the government did a terrible job. We never saw the U.S. government talking about get out in the sun and get your vitamin D, because people that get COVID, and if you have elevated levels of vitamin D, there's almost no risk of death, right? We didn't hear about go out and exercise because people that are overweight have a higher risk of dying if they get COVID. We never got any of this kind of advice from our health authorities. It was more stay inside and don't do anything. Anyway, before I go off on a rant of that, it's all to say, when the next pandemic occurs, whenever that might be, it's important for us to do our best to not respond with fear, that we try to look at this analytically and come up with strategies that we know work for dealing with viruses. And we've covered that certainly in the past and will again in the future. But the point is that by going into a state of fear, you elevate your stress, you deplete your glutathione levels, and you're actually impairing your immune system. So it's important that we stay in a state of love, which enhances our immune response, and we don't respond in fear if possible, right?
Yeah, I think it's so important because there's always going to be things, right? It's a pandemic, or it's inflation, or it's the economy. I mean, there's just always going to be stresses and anxieties, pushing on us. So I think that's so refreshing to hear. The solution really is love, is kindness, is eating well and sleeping well and doing the right things.
Yeah, it's certainly the first line of defenses, right? And but there are many, many things we can do to deal with viruses like COVID, but that's beyond the scope. But anyway, this of this LifeWave Connect. But this was just all to say that we want to limit the amount of stress in our life as much as possible, because it's not going to lead to good things. Okay, let's talk about some studies now that we have done to show the effects of the Aeon patch. We've covered X39 in pretty great detail. So let's talk about Aeon. Now, when we launched Aeon, it was called the X15 patch, and that's because it was the 15th patch that I had invented, and X39 is the 39th patch. We just happened to change the name to Aeon during the launch, but the researchers, they didn't know what it was going to be called, so they just called it X15. That was how we referred to it. And Dr. Tom Budzinski, very, very well known. He passed away, unfortunately, a number of years ago, but he was a very, very well-known neurologist, neurofeedback expert, and his wife, Helen, also a PhD. And so we asked Dr. Budzinski, because he was an expert in this, to take a look and see if he could determine what happens to the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, when you apply an Aeon patch. And this study is on our website, so we're not going to go through the whole thing now, but we had a successful outcome with it. And if we scroll down to the bottom, what we find out is that Aeon patch is predominantly produces an increase in parasympathetic activity. So you have in the autonomic nervous system, you have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic is a state of relaxation. So what this means is you put on the Aeon patch and it's going to help to put your body in a state of relaxation. And that's what's going to trigger a reduction in stress. And we, in fact, see the chemical changes in the body. Now, this was a study that we did with our LifeWave friend, Dr. Melinda Connor, who I can't say enough great things about. Her and her daughter, Caitlin, who's a PhD, have just been awesome at helping us to do studies to support our product. So just want to say a thank you to Dr. Melinda and Caitlin Connor for the incredible job they've done for us over the years. So this was a study that we did. It was a pilot study with 20 people. And we did this on the Aeon patch. And we wanted to look at a combination of biochemical and bioelectrical effects. And this is my favorite way of doing studies, where we do blood and or urine testing and then match it up with bioelectrical tests, and both sets of data will support one another. And this gets into the results. But basically, if we scroll down, there's a ton of data here, so we can't go through all of it. Here we go. Sorry about that. But what she did in this study is they did statistical analysis of each type of data. And here's the conclusion on pages 10 and 11. And we hit statistical significance. And basically, this is showing that in the pilot study, that we had a successful outcome in the markers that we were looking for. We also showed a basis that Aeon was having a beneficial change on levels of the L-DOPA. And of course, L-DOPA is going to trigger regulation of dopamine, and that's a feel-good chemical, so to help to regulate dopamine in the brain. And we also saw that Aeon caused an increase in glutamine, and the increase in glutamine leads to increases in glutathione. So we saw wearing the Aeon patch can trigger about a 30 to 35% increase in glutathione. Not as much as our glutathione patch, but for daily use at protecting glutathione levels, it's great. And then we did this study with Dr. Thornton Streeter. And Dr. Thornton Streeter, again, another really great guy in the field of energy medicine. He travels all around the world. And again, this was before the official release of the patch, so they referred to it as X15. But we did a study with a few different bioelectrical techniques like gas discharge visualization, polycontrast interference photography, and we can see the results through here. And without getting into all the details, again, as a pilot study, basically what we found out is that the Aeon or X15 patch produced a favorable response. Okay, and you can read about that in the conclusion. So significant positive energetic changes were observed in participants in the X15 group. Okay. All right, and then the last study that I wanted to bring up before we go to question and answer was this double-blind placebo-controlled study that we had published, and we were looking at the effects of Aeon again on the autonomic nervous system. And we did this study in conjunction with Dr. Homer Nazaran, who's since retired, but he was at the bioengineering department at the University of Texas in El Paso. Fantastic guy. I really miss doing studies with him. But in any case, what we found in the study is that we did hit statistical significance. So it says here, the hypothesis that wearing the Aeon patch for 20 minutes reduces stress was accepted as true. So this was important because this shows that within 20 minutes of wearing the patch, it produces a statistically significant effect. So what does that mean in real life? Let's say that you're having a meeting and you're going to put an X39 patch on the back of the neck and an Aeon patch at the point of pain or just below the belly button. Within 20 minutes, that person is going to get a reduction in stress. They're going to feel more relaxed. They'll have a decrease in inflammation and, of course, a reduction in pain. Many people see results within 5 minutes. In this study, based on the markers we're looking at, it's 20 minutes. But this is all to say that you don't need to wait a month before you're going to see benefits from X39 and Aeon. The results start right away. So, Jeff, the bottom line on this is that we've identified that a problem with aging is that we accumulate inflammation. And when there is elevated levels of stress in our life, this accelerates the process. So now we have two products that can help reduce this problem, right? What we can do is wear X39 to mobilize the stem cells, improve the way we heal, help manage inflammation. And we can use Aeon to relax the nervous system, reduce levels of stress and inflammation, and help prevent this problem from occurring in the first place. And that supports our levels of glutathione, which prevents the cell from aging. So it's this all means that we don't have to be so concerned about the aging process from the perspective of, how do I deal and manage with this stress? I don't have time to meditate. My life is very rushed. Now we have technology that is here to help.
I love that. And guess what I did? 20 minutes before this call, I took an Aeon and X39. I'm just kidding. I wear them every day now. And they really, truly have been life-changing for me as well. And in particular, the areas you've been talking about, I've certainly noticed a level of calm and a level, even the ability to feel like I can deal with the pressures and the stresses of every day have certainly improved. So I'm very grateful for these. Now we have a ton of questions that have come in, and I think it has to do with, just the popularity of these products. So I'm going to start with a couple here. And now, of course, some of these, David, some of these do get into medical things. So I know that typically as we get into those, there's some, disclaimers that we need to talk about, but we'll start with one. Will the patches support a person with PTSD and mental illness?
Okay, so this is a good time to remind people that I am not a medical doctor. I'm an inventor, and anything that we say on LifeWave Connect, if someone is interested in trying our products and they have a serious health condition, they should ask their doctor first, is it okay to use these products? So let's say we start with PTSD, right? Let's use that as an example. Certainly, you could draw the conclusion that based on the information presented, X39 and or Aeon could be used as an effective way to manage this problem. That would be a legitimate hypothesis and conclusion to draw. So we'd have to say this. First, we don't have any clinical studies that we've ever done where we use our patches to treat a health condition. And what I would say is that if someone were suffering from this, you could say, okay, yeah, that it's reasonable to say that our products could be used in this way. But I also don't know, is that person using any type of medication where it could be a problem? So I'd say work with your doctor, tell them, hey, I've got these products. One elevates copper peptide. One is used to reduce the stress on the nervous system. They stimulate the body with light. Do you see any problem with me using these products? And, I might approach it that way.
Okay, another one is, are there any specific patches that can increase dopamine, serotonin, GABA, and acetylcholine?
Acetylcholine,
sorry.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a bunch there. Let's see how we're going to approach this one. So actually, with X39, we did a study where we showed that it could increase GABA. And this was very interesting. This was actually an effect that we saw from X39 that was a surprise. I never expected it. We knew that the product was going to mobilize stem cells and reset genes. But when people started using X39, we saw they were sleeping better. And at first, this didn't really make any sense. But then when we did the blood and urine analysis, we found out GABA levels were going up. And GABA is used as a supplement to promote restful sleep. So it made sense why people were getting an improvement in sleep, but it didn't really make sense. Why would a stem cell product do that? And then what we found was research showing that GABA increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And BDNF is what regulates stem cell activity in the brain. So in other words, copper peptide was activating genes that increase GABA to increase BDNF so that the increase in stem cell mobilization could be organized in the brain. And the benefit that we saw to this was an improvement in cognitive function. So we saw that in 2 studies. So X39 is definitely going to have an effect on GABA. My suspicion is that Aeon and Silent Nights would also have an effect on GABA. And I seem to remember an older study that we did with Aeon showing improvements in GABA levels. With dopamine, we know that the aromatherapy mists have a beneficial effect on balancing dopamine levels in the brain. We don't really make that claim because it would be a medical claim that would get us in trouble. But in any case, the aromatherapy mist could be used that way too.
I'm seeing comments fly in. People are sleeping better on X39, and certainly I've experienced that as well. Okay, so would either or both Aeon and X39 be of help to someone with side effects going through maybe radiation or chemo? So oncologists generally do not like their patients taking antioxidants during chemo. Their feeling about it is that the antioxidants are going to protect the cancer cells from the chemo. I have a very different opinion about this because it's the antioxidant system that's a critical part of the immune system. And what we should be doing is supporting the immune function. And in fact, when I've met medical doctors that treat their patients with natural therapies, that's the general approach they take. They want to use ozone therapy to directly kill the cancer cells. They use IVs of vitamin C and glutathione to support the immune function. They may use natural supplements like garlic. They may even give injections of garlic or germanium sesquioxide to prevent the cancer cells from replicating. So to me, this is the sane and the rational approach. But in any case, if someone was going through chemotherapy, they would need to coordinate this with their doctor and say, hey, I'd like to take antioxidants to keep up my immune health
when can I take them? And it's probably fair to say that some doctors are going to be okay with someone taking antioxidants after chemo to help neutralize the toxic side effects. So if someone were going to introduce any of our products, most likely it would be post chemo, but they need to work. Every oncologist thinks a little bit differently about this, so they should work with their doctor.
We've got one here that talks about what I would love to know how X39 and Aeon can positively impact someone who has nerve issues.
So when I hear the term nerve issues, that could mean many different things. So let's say that's peripheral neuropathy. And actually, it's probably worded correctly. But what could be some nerve issues? So a serious problem with the nerves occurs with a decrease in glutathione. So it's no surprise that sugar is the enemy. It's one of the many enemies that we face in life. But certainly it's something that we have control over. Processed foods are, because they're depleted in nutrition, have very low fiber, high in high fructose corn syrup or sugar. This really leads to a lot of problems. But what happens is that as we get an increase in sugar in the body, we get increases in inflammation, decreases in glutathione. And if this goes on for a long period of time, one of the outcomes can be Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is directly correlated to low levels of glutathione. And it's why there's some medical doctors today that have their patients using glutathione IVs once or twice a week. And this can definitely improve someone's symptoms. It's not a cure for Parkinson's disease, but it can definitely slow down the progression and improve someone's symptoms. Of course, one of the most famous and well-known neurological disorders is going to be peripheral neuropathy, and that occurs from diabetes. So what happens here is, again, the high blood sugar levels lead to chronic levels of inflammation. We get a decrease in glutathione, impairment in circulation. And in the early stages of diabetic neuropathy, people experience a lot of pain, inflammation, restricted range of motion. Then if it progresses, it leads to ulcerations. And then if it progresses, it leads to amputation. So this is either one of these disorders is, both have terrible outcomes. You can die, of course, from diabetes or Parkinson's disease. So both are terrible and they're controllable. So we don't have any studies on using X39 and Aeon to treat Parkinson's or to treat diabetes. If people were going to use those patches to help support the overall health of the body, then I would say those would be the correct choices. One strategy would be to use X39 and glutathione during the day and to use Aeon at night. And what they might find is that they get a reduction in the pain and inflammation associated with the neuropathy and with the Parkinson's. There's other things that they can do. We have over 70 studies on pulsed electromagnetic field therapy and 2 human studies on the use of magnetic field therapy in the treatment of peripheral neuropathy. And also we have some experience with Parkinson's disease. So the good news is that there are some unconventional means, specifically energy medicine, magnetic field therapy, that can reverse both Parkinson's and diabetic neuropathy.
So when we talk about both these patches together, if someone's coming in and just starting, is there a particular patch placement and timing you would recommend for the combination of X39 and Aeon?
Yeah. So the good news here is that they both produce systemic effects. So if someone wears X39 on the back of the neck, that's totally fine. They don't need to put it at the point of pain or the issue. Putting Aeon below the belly button is fine. It's going to have an effect on the entire body. Now, if someone wants to place the Aeon patch or the X39 patch at the problem, so if they wanted to apply the Aeon patch on top of the foot, for example, if it was diabetic neuropathy, they definitely can do that. And they may find that it works a little bit better right at the point of the problem. So the placement is not as critical, but my advice would be X39 behind the neck or below the belly button, and then Aeon at the location where the problem is. I also saw some comments being made about chocolate. And so I feel compelled to respond since I am a chocolate lover. And so here is the good news. Chocolate is rich in copper. And so if you're consuming chocolate, you're getting a source of copper, which helps supports the activity of X39. It's going to be the sugar in chocolate that's the issue, not the chocolate itself. So if you're having chocolate that's, let's say, 70% cacao, you're in pretty good shape. Another thing about chocolate is there are clinical studies showing that cacao actually helps to support the health of the stem cells in the body. And it's because of the antioxidants that are in dark chocolate, probably along with some other things. So anyway, dark chocolate is definitely not the problem. Try to keep the amount of sugar that's in the chocolate low. So milk chocolate may not be the best choice.
Well, I can definitely get behind more chocolate in my diet. I mean, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Well, David, as we kind of wrap up our time here, and we're getting close to the end, I want to ask you a question. I know I've heard you talk about this in the past, but I think everybody kind of has their own methods for dealing with stress in life. And you certainly talked about the products that can help with that. And you've talked a little bit about love and a little bit about kindness and things. But can you share with us, kind of personally, what do you do to manage stress along with wearing the patches? Are there any tips you'd give us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, to put this in perspective, I usually wake up at 6 a.m. I go to bed about 11 o'clock at night. So I try to get 7 hours of sleep. My work keeps me busy, the entire time. I get a break I don't have breakfast because I practice intermittent fasting. I have a very quick lunch and I do take an hour for dinner. So what that means is I have really, really long work hours. And so years ago, I developed a number of techniques to help manage all of this. One of the things is it's very important to take time to exercise, because exercise is a great way of relieving stress. It's also very important because it turns on genes associated with health. Of course, it's going to help to manage our body composition. It helps to keep our bones strong and healthy. So having, doing resistance training on a regular basis is so critically important. Another thing to be conscious of, especially while you sleep, is breathing through the nose and not being a mouth breather. There's studies that show that when you breathe through the nose, that you reduce risk of heart disease, and it leads to lower blood pressure. So that's something that can be of help. I love a form of exercise called Qigong. It's not really complicated to do, and I've been practicing it for many, many years. So, exercises like Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation is a way to, stop and relax a little bit. Other things, I tend to really enjoy food. And so I will, if I find myself in a stressful situation, I want to stop and do something enjoyable. And maybe it means, I spend a little time with a loved one like my son or daughter, and just laugh for a few minutes. That's always a great stress reliever. Having a piece of dark chocolate, I love mangoes, so having some like healthy fruit like mangoes, I find reduces stress. Just doing something that's psychologically enjoyable, is a great stress reliever. Sometimes going outside and going for a short walk, you have a conference call, maybe it doesn't go well. You need time to stop and regroup, take a break, go for a walk, get out in the sun, get out in the fresh air. One quick thing, this was something that I learned from a medical doctor from Russia years ago. It's really interesting. You stand and you face the sun with your palms facing the sun, and you close your eyes and you focus breathing through the head and through the pineal gland, and you'll start to see a bright red light forming around your eyes and around your head. It's really interesting meditation. But what was found in Russia is that when you take in sunlight through your palms, and you only need to do this for 2 or 3 minutes, that it actually re-energizes and recharges all the acupuncture meridians in the body. So that's a technique that works very, very well. Not so much during the winter, in some places, but here in Florida, not so bad.
We'll have to come visit you.
Yeah. So this is all to say that there are many, many techniques. There are many, many techniques to use for stress reduction. And we could spend actually an entire webinar talking about all the options that are available, and there are many. One last one I think I would mention on this very long list is taking a bath in magnesium salts. Mm-hmm. So let's say someone is dealing with high blood pressure. They have a lot of tension in their neck and shoulders. Using magnesium, and it can be, something common like Epsom salts, which is magnesium sulfate. And you can have that scented with an essential oil like lavender. But taking a bath in magnesium is a wonderful stress reliever. Taking a hot bath in magnesium almost immediately brings down stress and blood pressure. So if a person was having a stressful day, they might want to finish in the bathtub with some magnesium, put an Aeon patch on, sleep with the Aeon patch, and have a great night's sleep.
Perfect. Well, with that just about concludes our time. So thank you everyone for joining us. David, any last thoughts or words that you wanted to share before we wrap up and conclude here today?
Yes. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here and for taking their valuable time to listen to what we have to say. Secondly, stress can be a dragon in people's lives. It can be this monster that overwhelms people. And the really good news is that doesn't have to be the case. If you're someone that's suffering with stress, you don't have to suffer with it. It doesn't have to control your life. You have products and techniques and strategies for managing the stress, getting it out of your life so you can have a better quality of life and not be a victim to stress. That would be the good news.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you next time. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep, thank you, David. Bye.